So we noted with Nietzsche, when engaging in battles with monsters, it's often easy to become one. It was Jacques Ellul who, in the Technological Society, noted how technique is used to maximize efficiency in all its forms. When Marx was liberating the masses from exploitation and alienation due to the bourgeoisie attempting to maximize efficiency for profit's sake, often paying workers inadequately for their labor since the workers do not own the modes of production themselves, working essentially as wage slaves, he relies upon the very same technical methods that the bourgeoisie used against the proletariat to instill change. Again, like swapping an exploited and objectified person, where people are treated as tools or products, back into a subject via reification, or using virtual potentiality via Deleuze or Landian hyperstition, where fictions become facts, we can alter the flows of desire in capitalistic systems, altering men's ideological lens in life, akin to creating a class form of consciousness, escaping false consciousness so as to create a system that works in the favor of the proletariat people, a socialist system where they do own the modes of production, combating against exploitation and Marxist alienation. Thus, the need to get outside, since the outside is associated with the alien itself, breaking apart organized and bourgeois structures of identity for a sense of proletariat difference, where all the workers of the world unite as one, almost alchemically, where one is all, or where pluralism becomes monism, as Deleuze noted. One type of reification was, of course, commodity fetishism, whereby people form closer relationships to products than they do people, getting lost in consumerism, turning our society into a spectacle mediated by iconic images and the media, as noted by Guy Debord, or where everyone becomes a one-dimensional man, as noted by Herbert Marcuse and other thinkers at the Frankfurt School like Adorno, creating a culture industry, keeping people passive and under ideological control, unable to think critically and ask questions, and thus get outside, questioning authority like a Promethean antichrist. A good example of this is people finding love in the objects they own, where whoever ends up with the most toys wins is the dominant ideological outlook on life. New clothes, flashy cars, expensive houses, etc. fuel men's egos, guiding their emotions by which they then make their meaning. In short, we focus on and place value in the material object itself and do not consider the human cost, i.e. labor, that went in to produce such a thing. This is particularly true of the elite mindset. For if we did, then we would see how much of what we own comes at a great human cost. There's the old saying that one man's pleasure comes at the expense of another man's pain. And if we are to make meaning in the objects we own, then it only shows not just how superficial we are, but how monstrous and inhuman we are, caring not to even consider how much exploitation and alienation and pain was experienced by people, i.e. outsiders, that went into producing such a product. It makes all materialistic men somewhat evil, or at the very least ignorant of the world around them and the plight of its people, competing with others solely for the sake of social status, again, conforming and assimilating to the dominant social ideals, i.e. embracing consumerism at a subconscious level, since all ideology operates subconsciously, as Marx noted, for a social sense of acceptance, rising up the social ranks. They are doing it without being aware they are doing it, which is how Marx defined ideology. This is also true of the digital age, where clicks and likes fuel capitalism via advertising revenue services on social media websites, owned and operated by the elite class, reducing man back to a state of serfdom, a techno-feudal state, as Varoufakis notes, amidst capitalism's collapse. Instead of being liberated by communism with capitalism's collapse, we are thrown back into serfdom itself, going backwards in time instead of forwards, which makes sense when considering the elite mindset. Again, history is a two-way street. We can progress forward or regress back when living in an eternal present, or Augustinian notion of time, the present day, present time of Lane's Wired World. To Ellul, however, we must remember that it was Marx that took the masses of men on this technical turn. Again, as we know with Nietzsche, to fight a monster one must become one. And so to Ellul, while Marx attempted to liberate man in a Gnostic manner via his eschatological ways of thinking, he ultimately ended up creating a technical system which focused on efficiency for the masses of men. Such a technique to Ellul operates on its own, only serving a sense of efficiency itself. As such, though technique was used as a liberating force by Marx, it could in turn prove to be just as oppressive against the very people in which it served. Akin to a two-edged sword, one can cut others, but also in turn cut themselves. As we know with Jack Parsons, freedom is a two-edged sword in the sense where freedom and responsibility are never blunt, even if wielded by blunt people. Still, elite sociopaths and psychopaths tend to lack empathy for others, uncaring of anyone outside themselves or their class. As man pushes along the path of progress in the Gnostic sense, led on by eschatological ways of thinking, technique and efficiency come to the forefront, leading us along an inhuman path of alienation. This is ironic when considering how the proletariat are meant to be liberated from alienation in life. To Marx, relying upon the dialectics of Hegel, but not his idealism, and his materialistic view of reality, rejected idealism itself. Consciousness itself, whether false or class consciousness, comes from the material environment to Marx. Like a state of ambivalence, there is a struggle to unify opposites. Here, of course, we can make the alchemic connections to thinkers like Hegel or Deleuze or Derrida. It is thus within the inherent contradictions of capitalism itself that drives all form of progress, linked to rebellious and Gnostic revolutions, hence making Marx an eschatological thinker. We have already shown how eschatological thinking leads to death and rebirth and thus change via thinkers like Hegel, where the negation is negated as we push towards the absolute and self-realization, since Hegel, unlike Marx, was an idealist, known for German idealism, right, where the spirit is the absolute reality. We can do this through Deleuze, through the body without organs, and difference in repetition, creating the third term from the prior two. Derrida, via deconstructionism, was also created pluralities from internal contradictions. We have Carl Jung and the notion of coincidentia oppositorum, or reconciling opposites via his individuation process to form the self, right, where the unconscious is made conscious. We have Aleister Crowley, of course, and his demonic summoning of demons from the subconscious dying and being reborn through the Night of Pan, while relying upon the Agoides or demonic genius or guardian angel to get past Choronzon, etc., going as far back to Joachim Fiore and his Three Ages. To thinkers like Jakob Tabes and Eric Vogelin, all is pushed along the Gnostic path of progress as we immanentize the eschaton. Thus, all is confined to the Gnostic path toward progress, whether that occurs from a more spiritual or material mindset. As we said, Marx was no idealist and did not believe in creating utopias. All must therefore be understood within the material conditions of man. To speak of ideals without engaging with reality and real-world connections that people are placed in would leave idealists detached from reality in some sense, lofty armchair philosophers trapped in their ivory towers with their head in the clouds and their feet far from touching the ground. Thus, progress is confined to a historical and political and material process, where eroding social class, while not necessarily promising a paradise for people, could help them escape their exploitation so as to develop or lead to new possibilities or virtual potentialities, which could eventually come and manifest into creation for such men. We could see this akin to Land's notion of needing to experience the world, right? Dealing with material reality, since we can never fully know reality via the noumenon, and his hatred for the cathedral, the intellectual institutes of power. The only difference is Land's Dark Enlightenment serves autocratic institutes instead of democratic ones, caring little for the plight of people, wanting to exit the Anthropocene age we are in, heading towards full automation and Marxist dead labor, where the Fang Noumena, the vampire, extracts further profit from living labor to the point where living labor, i.e. the human, will no longer be needed, leading to the eschaton or apocalypse or singularity, only seen from the perspective of something like the movie Terminator 2, Judgment Day. In a world driven by technique and efficiency, focused heavily on technology, whereas Heidegger noted techne will reveal things to us, we could see a connection to the alien outside. Like Christ, who also reveals through revelation, leading to the apocalypse of John, it seems technique is having its way with us as a species. Not even Marx was able to escape eschatological ways of thinking, despite his view of Christianity being the opium of the people, allowing them to remain lost in comforting ideological lies and illusions while being exploited as people, where Christianity is a tool used by the upper-class elites to mind control the masses and keep them passive and subservient to capitalism itself, creating false consciousness itself. And so the need to move from false consciousness to class consciousness through material struggle, as opposed to idealist or spiritual insight. Even so, the transcendental noumenon via eschatological thinking works its way into men's minds, pushing toward the Book of Revelation itself, where the great beast is ridden upon by the whore of Babylon, linked to the fall of the Tower of Babel and mankind's fall out of the Garden of Eden for eating of the fruit on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Like Marx's historical framework, Nietzsche sought to go beyond good and evil, noting their historical underpinnings, which would allow people to create their own values, the transvaluation of values, rather than adhere to ones that previously existed, overthrowing Christian morality. And yet here we are, pushing towards the path of material progress via coming to terms with the Gnostic Antichrist in us all, the Promethean trickster archetype that pushes his way back to the pleroma, dying so as to be alchemically reborn via revelation and eschatology. Only now, instead of pushing along in a spiritual sense, he does so merely in a material manner. Finite man loses the infinite, though both are needed. In an odd way, he keeps himself confined to the material world of the demiurge, developing himself into a demiurgic deity, destroying or overcoming the demiurge by becoming one, rather than escaping out from the material plane and into the pleroma. As we brought up in our last video, such is what it means to make a deal with the devil. Like how Marx took the masses on a technical turn, one must make a deal with the devil or become a Promethean Antichrist, or become a monster in order to fight monsters. And so, as man loses his humanity, I ask, just as W.B. Yeats had in his poem The Second Coming, and what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born? Death and rebirth take the rebel alien down his road of inhuman history. Like Thrasymachus noted, justice serves the stronger. And so man seeks to become strong himself, turning into the very thing he hates so as to escape out from injustice, becoming reborn as a rough beast. As Spengler noted, this is a Faustian civilization doomed to fall. And like Adam and Eve or Babylon the Great, what other choice do we humans have but to gnostically fight for our Promethean form of freedom, despite how it may turn each man for a time into a monster? In the coming future, it may be more important than ever for mankind to remember his humanity once he becomes reborn as the great biblical beast, perhaps a transhuman, being ridden upon by the whore of Babylon as he becomes something other than what he once previously was. For love, we must remember, is the law, forever connected to the will as it works its way throughout the world. Thus, the law and the will must always remain linked to love, akin to a holy trinity of sorts, a triptych which, as we noted with Quatrain, is of primary importance, relating materialistic and finite or immanent matter to the transcendental and infinite or spiritual mother via mater. While Marx abandoned the spirit or idealism of Hegel for finite and material man, it is within the interplay of finite, immanent, and infinite transcendental that the phenomenodelic solution of Quatrain flourishes. Here, a new form of negation arises where thesis and antithesis synthesize. Like Prometheus bound to finitude or Christ dying on the cross as a finite man of flesh, we cannot fall victim just to infinity or spiritual idealism as Marx noted, nor can we merely fall victim to finitude or materiality itself. Both insights will become needed once this rough material beast is born, where men do not solely keep their heads in the clouds nor merely keep their feet grounded. Men must learn to balance between both states of being, above and below in alchemic equivalence, proving to be a paradox, as Kierkegaard and Crowley noted, between finite and infinite, between socially constructed nurture and biological nature, both of which are housed in the heart and thus rest with phantasia and pneuma, linked to the spiritual and material limits of love.